Good afternoon, everyone. Did you know that a snail cannot go backwards? Now, you may know this already, but it was news to me. I was watering plants in my garden last week, and I filled the watering can, tilted it over the tomato plants, but only a trickle came out the end. And when I looked down the spout, it was completely blocked by something dark. So I got a stick and poked it down into the watering can, and out into the can popped a snail, sadly dead. I reckon that the snail had looked for somewhere kind of damp and dark, crawled into the watering can. It had gone up the spout, but as you will see, the spout gets rather narrower up towards the top, and there came a point where the snail had gone as far as it could, and it could go no further and got jammed. Snails cannot go backwards, so I'm afraid that was it for the snail. It made me think a bit about the danger of putting ourselves in a position that we can't get out of. Because you either end up having to go through with something that you're really not comfortable with or wouldn't want to do, or you have to make an embarrassing U-turn and end up looking rather foolish. I remember being told once by a very cross 6-year-old that if we didn't let her have a puppy, she was going to leave home forever. I told her that we weren't getting a puppy. So in a fit of temper, she packed a bag and marched out. Well, it didn't take long before there was a timid knock on the back door, and a rather shamefaced child walked back inside. It turns out that being 6, having a bag with nothing in it but toys, and wearing pyjamas and welly boots wasn't ever going to provide enough to set up a new home somewhere else. In the Bible, there's a story about 2 men, King Darius and a chap called Daniel. They were the very best of friends, which sadly made other people in the palace a bit jealous. The king was persuaded to make a decree that everyone else was to bow down before him as if he was God, and anyone who didn't do this would be thrown to the lions. Now, King Darius didn't really think this one through, but he was flattered at the thought that people would see him as a god, so the decree was duly signed. And then, while the ink was still wet, the palace staff announced with great glee that Daniel would not bow before the king, because Daniel only worshipped the God of the Israelites. Now Darius had backed himself into a corner. He didn't want his friend Daniel thrown to the lions, but equally he couldn't go back on a royal decree, because that would make him look bad as a king. So in some despair he had no choice but to have Daniel thrown into the lion's den. Now, fortunately, God protected Daniel and he survived and all was well. But Darius, like my 6-year-old, learned an important lesson. Be careful what you say and what you agree to. Try not to back yourself into a corner or make ultimatums, because there is always a danger that you will end up with your tail between your legs with embarrassment, or worse still, you find yourself stuck somewhere that you don't want to be, doing things that you really didn't want to do with no way back. Remember the snail. We'll say a prayer. Heavenly Father, it's easy to say things we don't really mean and find ourselves stuck in a place we can't get away from. Help us to think before we speak, to give ourselves room to change our minds, and if we make a mistake, the space to turn round and find a way out. May God bless you and keep you this week and always. Amen.